Hi everyone, and welcome to the lecture video, Institutional Review Boards. In this video, we're going to explore how institutional review boards, or IRBs, ensure that modern social science research is conducted using fair and equitable principles. In social science, we are usually working with human subjects, meaning that we're working with someone who is a living, breathing person. This means that our research will likely have to go through an institutional review board, or IRB. The function of an IRB has been standardized through the Federal Policy for the Protections of Human Subjects, a policy heavily influenced by the principles of the Belmont Report. Remember, the Belmont Report was the product of a federal workforce in response to the Tuskegee syphilis study and other ethically questionable research in the United States. It called for three principles of ethical research: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. The Federal Policy for Protection of Human Subjects includes 5 parts. Part A is the common rule. This part provides the basic framework for human subject research, including the role of the IRB in the review process and guidelines for informed consent. Parts B through D deal with the vulnerable populations described in the previous lecture video, and Part E explains the registration process for institutional review boards. The common rule dictates how an institutional review board is set up. It states that IRBs must consist of at least 5 people and that the IRB membership should be diverse. Diversity relates to personal characteristics like gender, race, and cultural backgrounds, as well as areas of expertise. The board is also required to be diverse in affiliations, with a requirement for at least 1 member whose focus is non-scientific matters and 1 member who's not affiliated with the institution. The diversity requirements are meant to ensure that the review of an IRB is not discriminatory toward any single profession or research area, as well as promoting different viewpoints during the review. For example, consider the viewpoints of a medical professional who deals with cancer and a social scientist who focus on race issues in the criminal justice system. Both of these individuals bring a unique perspective to an IRB review that may help them envision different risks and benefits of the same research study. The 5-person membership is really small, as most IRBs have a larger board membership. At UT Tyler, for example, we have 3 separate IRB boards, and these members include faculty from every college on campus, as well as administrators and community members that focus on student issues and the community impact. So what is the role of the IRB in the research process? The IRB is in charge of analyzing a proposed research study before it begins. A researcher will put in a research proposal explaining to the IRB what they want to study and outlining all of their research design procedures. The IRB will then do a review of the study, looking in particular for those 3 major guidelines I just described. Does the study have procedures to ensure that participation is granted on voluntary informed consent? And when the risks and benefits of the study are analyzed, do the benefits outweigh the risks? Based on the type of study, the IRB may also review other procedures. They may look at the procedures put into place to protect the subjects participating in the research study. Protection of subjects means not only the safety of the participants, but also procedures that protect the participants' identity and private information from being released to the broader public. For example, if you were participating in a research study where you identified the types of illegal drugs that you've used in the past, you would want to know that the information you discuss is kept private and is not being used by law enforcement. The IRB review into this type of study would look for procedures like removing your name from your answers or putting all of your answers into a locked and password protected location to ensure that your answers would remain private. Now, IRB reviews will also examine the researcher's use of vulnerable subjects as described by parts B through D of the Federal Policy for the Protection of Human Subjects. There are 3 different ways that a study can be reviewed by the IRB. The type of review is influenced by the specific study characteristics. Exempt research means that it does not have to go through an IRB review at all. There are different reasons that a study is classified exempt, but the most common in our field is that the research is being done in a way that research subjects are never identified and therefore face no loss of privacy risks. For example, if you were doing research using a data set that only contained numbers to identify the people, but didn't include their name or any other identifiable information, then you would meet the requirements for exempt research. The exempt research proposal is pretty short, and it's usually only viewed by the chairperson of the IRB committee. Once they confirm that the research meets the requirement for exempt review, they'll notify the researcher and the research study can begin. FYI, the research studies you complete in this course are considered exempt because they're done for classroom purposes only, and the information will never be published. So you will not have to go through IRB approval for your activity here. Now, expedited review does require an IRB review, but it only requires a review by the IRB chairperson and potentially a few other members of the committee. Expedited review must not include a vulnerable population as defined by the federal policy for the protection of human subjects. It must also include no more than minimal risk, and it must not include any form of deception. Full board review is the most extensive and time-consuming, and as you can see from this chart, it's also the least common type of review to occur. Full board reviews are required for any research that does not meet the requirement of exempt or expedited. Full board reviews mean that all of the IRB members in a particular institution must meet to approve the study. When an IRB has concluded their review, they can make a decision to approve the study as is, they can require modifications, or they can reject the proposal. Usually proposals are only rejected if they have very obvious and very serious risks associated with the research design. Most proposals will be approved as is or will require minor modifications, like changing the consent letter wording, modifying the study recruitment procedure slightly, etc. Again, the goal is to ensure that the researcher has thoroughly considered all of the ethical guidelines for the research and has made provisions to eliminate or at least reduce the risk as much as possible in order to ensure the participants' safety and well-being. Every IRB is different, and procedures may vary slightly based on the membership and the standard procedures used by that institution. When I was in Nebraska, our IRB was very formal, and it did not allow visitors during the procedures. Instead, if they had questions or they wanted modifications, they would write the researcher a letter detailing their concerns. And then you would create a letter in response and send it in with your revised IRB application for the next full board review meeting. The board only met twice a month, and with back-to-back process, getting an IRB proposal approved could easily take 4 to 6 months at a time. The IRB here at UT Tyler is a lot more flexible, and they allow principal investigators to attend the board meetings when a study is newly being reviewed, so they can brief the board on the research protocols and answer questions as they arise. Dr. Woolgeorge and I have participated in multiple full board reviews of our research proposals here at UT Tyler. For one of these, we were requesting to conduct a study that involved our research participants using YouTube videos. There were several privacy concerns that made this higher than minimal risk, namely the fact that our subjects would be sending data electronically through an open website that included their names, faces, and identifiable information. And so because of these privacy concerns, the chairperson of the IRB committee asked us to attend in person to answer questions from the panel. They also invited a technology representative from our campus admin to help answer questions about YouTube, data privacy, and other tech-related concerns. We sat in the meeting while they discussed a proposal, and we answered questions about our procedures, and then we left when it was time for the committee to vote on the proposal. The IRB approved our study pending a few minor modifications to our forms, which we edited and sent over to the chairperson for final review. So a lot of this process depends on the structure and the composition of your institutional's review board and how they do their procedures. When an IRB approves a study design, the researcher is given the green light to proceed with the research. But that's not the end of the IRB's involvement in the research process. IRBs will check in regularly with the researchers as the researchers progress. An IRB approval only lasts for a certain time period, usually 1 calendar year. At the end of that time period, the IRB will require the researcher to submit an annual report and to request continuity or continuation of the IRB approval. The annual report allows the researcher to identify how the researcher is going and also ensure that the researcher is still using the approved research design. Researchers can also contact the IRB during the middle of the study if they need to file a change of protocol. Oftentimes, a research study will require some type of modification when it's actually implemented. When this happens, the researchers must file a change of protocol form with their IRB, asking for approval to modify the procedures. For example, my dissertation idea arose out of a larger study about sex offender policy that I started with one of my professors in my PhD program. Our plan was to send out a letter to all of the offenders listed on the Nebraska State Sex Offender Registry, about 3,300 at that time, inviting them to interview with us and asking them to tell us how the sex offender laws had impacted their life. Given the reticence of most sex offenders to publicize their information, we expected about 25 to 50 participants, and our original IRB protocol listed 50 people as our total sample size. Little did we know that our invite was going to go over much better than we expected. I sent out the invitations in the mail on Thursday morning, and by Friday, I already had over 50 people calling me to request an interview. In all, we got about 300 people that requested to be interviewed. A lot of their stories were so unique that we wanted to interview more than the 50 we had originally planned for. So we filed a change of protocol form with the University IRB to ask to be allowed to interview more people. The picture here shows you a piece of the change of protocol form for the UT Tyler IRB. The modification request form includes 9 areas of potential change, including changes to the general study information like study title, changes to research design, changes in research personnel, changes in the risk or the research financial cost, and as well as other changes. For every change requested, the researcher must provide justification and discuss how it will affect the risk-benefit ratio of the study. Now finally, researchers are also required to notify the IRB when the study ends, and most IRBs will request a final report detailing the total study outcomes as well. All right, well that concludes our IRB lecture video. Thanks for watching, everyone.